Robert Ryan could be a dangerous man. But he could also be a romantic one. The first time I saw Robert Ryan on screen, it wasn't as a brooding tough guy. It was as Chris Jones in the 1943 wartime drama romance Tender Comrade. Written by Dalton Trumbo and directed by Edward Dmytryk and starring Ginger Rogers, Tender Comrade is a five-hanky tearjerker about five women who pool their resources and live together while their husbands are away at war. Through flashbacks, Rogers reminisces about her life with her husband, Chris. And in this early supporting role, Ryan's performance is that of a compassionate and caring spouse. He offers support and empathy to his wife as they navigate being newlyweds and the coming hardships of war.
You just think how it's going to be when I come home. You'll be waiting and I'll jump off and pick you up, clear off the ground.
This was my first introduction to Robert Ryan. He's really romantic in this. A lot of people might not be familiar with this Robert Ryan. They're more familiar with a different Robert Ryan. And initially, Ginger Rogers thought him too tall and too mean-looking to play Chris. But that's what's remarkable about him. When looking at Ryan as the romantic, you see his deeply lined face has an air of melancholy and world-weariness to it. And there's a charming, flirty glint in his eye.
When you go to school, I'm going to carry your books for you. What kind of books are they?
But it wasn't just Chris Jones in Tender Comrade. He played other strong romantic types like Mr. George Leslie Honey, the restless millionaire businessman with a secret who spends 6 weeks a year with Shirley Booth hidden away from the world. In 1954's About Mrs. Leslie. This is straight melodrama. And he's charming and he's gentle and he's obviously troubled.
I didn't realize that I'd been on a trip until I found a whole new life with you.
But not in that dark sort of way I would discover later in films like On Dangerous Ground, Caught, and Beware My Lovely. In About Mrs. Leslie, Ryan brings poignant melancholy to the screen, his portrayal showcasing the complexities of loneliness and unfulfilled desires. He's also at his romantic best in Fritz Lang's Clash by Night, where he's reckless, irresponsible, and cocky. Not a bad guy, but definitely not a good choice as a partner. And he woos, and by wooing I mean seducing, Barbara Stanwyck away from the reliable, dependable, kind-hearted Paul Douglas.
Somebody has to need me, love me. How do people go on this way? Tell me.
And in Nicholas Ray's Born to be Bad, he plays a cynical and worldly author that is madly in love with Joan Fontaine's Christabel Cain. He's tough-talking with a hard outer shell, but we see the heartbreak and disappointment Christabel causes him when she chooses money over love. And to be honest, I would have picked Ryan's author over Zachary Scott's Millionaire any day. But I like to read. So a lot of these films, they aren't award season contenders, but they're extremely entertaining. Robert Ryan could steal any good film right out from under his other co-stars. And he could make the bad films worth watching by bringing something interesting to his characterizations, like his role as the ex-communist sucked back into the post-war Red Scare world in Howard Hughes' pet project, The Woman on Pier 13, a.k.a. I Married a Communist.
If you crowd me too hard, I'll kick the whole thing over, and if I have to start punching, I'll start at the top. Is that clear?
And in the muddled film, The Woman on the Beach, where he plays Coast Guard officer Scott Burnett, suffering from PTSD, who becomes romantically entangled with the mysterious woman, played by Joan Bennett, and her blind husband, played by Charles Bickford. In this one, Ryan effectively conveys Scott's internal emotional state, his inability to fully grapple with what he's experienced during the war.
It's not hard to guess you were torpedoed. It was pretty bad. Very bad.
But just with the shift of the light, that same face becomes a threatening home to danger. That glint hardens and turns cruel. It's there in Beware My Lovely, where his murderous handyman terrorizes war widow Ida Lupino. And it's there in Caught, where his controlling and abusive Howard Hughes-inspired character, Smith Ulrich, another great movie name, terrorizes his naive wife, played by Barbara Bel Geddes.
Is she coming down? Why the devil do you think I sent you up there, you dirty little parasite? Get her down here.
His bad guys were bad. Like I said, on screen, Robert Ryan could be a dangerous man. And that danger first appeared in 1947's Crossfire. Directed by Edward Dmytryk and co-starring Robert Young and Robert Mitchum, Crossfire explores the themes of bigotry, prejudice, and anti-Semitism in post-World War II America, and follows the investigation into the murder of a man named Joseph Samuels. Initially, police can find no motive for the crime, but as differing accounts of the events come to light, it becomes clear to Young's detective Finley that he is dealing with anti-Semitism as the motive for murder. Ryan first read The Brick Foxhole, the book Crossfire was adapted from while he was in the Marines. He knew then that if the book were ever turned into a film, he wanted to play the big, aggressive, loud bigot Montgomery. Ryan said, "I thought such a part would make an actor, not break him." This is the exact opposite of the romantic Ryan of Tender Comrade and About Mrs. Leslie. And these hard, evil, angry men would become some of his best-known characters. There's Reno Smith in Bad Day at Black Rock, a malevolent force in a jaunty red baseball cap, seemingly affable, but the air of danger around him is palpable.
I'm trying to be hospitable, Miss McCready.
Reno is running the small town of Black Rock like a fascist fiefdom, as he tries to prevent Spencer Tracy from discovering and reporting the dark fate of Komoko, the town's lone Japanese farmer. He plays the brutal crime boss, Sandy, in Sam Fuller's House of Bamboo. Beautifully shot on location in post-war Japan, Ryan Sandy is willing to sacrifice any member of his gang to ensure the job gets done, and no one talks. As Earl Slater in Odds Against Tomorrow, he's angry, and there's no hiding his bigotry. He's old and out of touch in a hip new world, and he's on a collision course with Harry Belafonte's Johnny Ingram. Both men are desperate in their own ways. They're angry and they're full of hate.
I wouldn't trust my own self on a deal like this with a colored boy.
You and your big white brothers. Drink enough tea with them and stay out of the watermelon patch.
Slater is supported by his girlfriend, played by Shelley Winters, but he has no direction, no prospects, and pulling a bank heist seems like the only way he can save himself from the inevitability of the future. Johnny is in deep with his bookies, his wife has left him, and he has everything on the line. They both do. They have everything to lose. And they turn on each other, with explosive consequences. But in reality, Ryan and Belafonte were very good and lifelong friends, and Ryan was nothing like his on-screen characters. He accepted these roles because they were challenging and complex. Off-screen, he was a family man and committed to liberal and progressive ideas, and he devoted his energy to causes that were important to him. He was a man of empathy, and his co-stars often called him the nicest man in Hollywood. He may have played the bigots, but he believed in combating the hatred and rot in society with education and tolerance. He played those roles because those stories were important to tell. As early as Crossfire, there was an awareness that maybe these kinds of roles could kill a career. J.R. Johnson recounts in the book The Lives of Robert Ryan that after an RKO screening, execs told Ryan, "It's a brave thing you're doing. You're gambling with your career." But audiences have the last word.
Crossfire is one of the best pictures I've seen in years.
At last, Hollywood comes of age.
I and my whole family compliment you on your honesty and courage.
Don't cut one frame or one word of Crossfire. I shall remember Crossfire as long as I live.
Crossfire was a hit. The role of Montgomery did not break him. Mostly because the Hollywood landscape in the post-war era was a brand new world. There was a new type of leading man. He was rough, rugged, tough, and complex. Between the romantic roles and the bad guys, there was an entire career filled with these brooding, complicated characters. Like in The Setup, where he delivers a remarkably physical performance as Stoker Thompson, an aging boxer dreaming of one last win. Directed by Robert Wise and taking place in real time over the course of 73 minutes, Ryan, as Stoker, says very little in the film. He's mostly reacting to those around him. He's watching. He's listening. Stoker's got big, wild dreams that have really no possibility of coming true.
But if I get a top spot again, we'll get $500, maybe $6.
But what he doesn't know is that he's got such a reputation for losing that his manager and trainer have fixed the fight without telling him. Surrounded by an array of colorful locker room characters, the seedy world of the boxing circuit is presented as a shady racket, a place where washed-up guys are paid to take falls for money and keep taking punches long after they should have turned their back on the ring. And Stoker is one of those men.
35 in this business, you're an old man.
But once he hits the mat, Ryan, a real-life collegiate boxing champ, becomes a man of action. Stoker is one of Ryan's beautifully drawn, sympathetic characters, a man who's getting too old to dream and wants to experience one more moment of glory. Cary Grant ran into Ryan on the RKO lot and told him his performance in the setup had been the best he'd seen that year. And Ryan remains sympathetic, although complicated, in films like Act of Violence, where he's the war vet out for vengeance. He arrives in Van Heflin's small town, his hat pulled low, his trench coat tightly belted, with his limp a constant reminder of the brutality of war. He seems to be a harbinger of doom. But as the story goes on, what is revealed is a tragic tale of wartime betrayal that causes a shift in the viewer's initial perception of his character. "1951's On Dangerous Ground," directed by Nicholas Ray, provides Ryan with a further opportunity to explore a character's journey towards sympathy and redemption. He plays Jim Wilson, a jaded police detective who has spent too long dwelling on the dark side of humanity. He lets his job consume him and destroy most of his empathy for his fellow man.
Why do you make me do it? You know you're gonna talk. I'm gonna make you talk.
Ray paints a dark, seedy urban world of criminals and underage B-girls, drunks and stick-up men. And Jim is another Ryan character on the edge.
How do you do it? How do you live with yourself?
I don't. I live with other people. This is just a job like any other job. I do it the best I can. It's never enough, but I do it. When I go home, I don't take this stuff with me. I leave it outside. To get anything out of this life, you gotta put something in it. From the heart.
He's got a short temper and too easily resorts to brutality and violence, and that gets him sent upstate, away from the city, to help in the investigation of the murder of a young girl. And it's here that Jim meets Mary, played by Ida Lupino, whose brother is a suspect in the crime. Mary is blind, she's kind, and she's gentle, and she listens. She talks to Jim in a way that probably no one has in a very long time, if ever.
Sometimes people who are never alone are the loneliest. Don't you think so?
I don't know. I've never thought it out.
I think you have.
And his interactions with her begin to chip away at his hardened exterior. And Ryan's performance expertly conveys emotional transformation. On Dangerous Ground is a gritty film, but it's also a beautiful and lyrical one. On screen, from westerns to romances to noir and adventure, every role was an exploration, painted with the full palette of emotion. Robert Ryan, through his characters, invited us to confront the truths of a world that lives in shades of gray. There are 8 million stories in the cinema cities. This has been one.